This is Toronto Island Airport. This is a neighborhood along Scarboro Beach Boulevard just south of Queen Street West. And this is the Gardiner Expressway. These three places have one thing in common. They all used to be amusement parks. Long before the construction of Toronto's most iconic landmarks, these amusement parks would define the city's waterfront, providing Torontonians with a thriving world of family fun, thrilling rides, and warm summer days that live on in the stories passed down to children and grandchildren. As of the year 2026, however, only a handful of signs remain that these places ever existed at all. So join me, dear viewers, as today we embark on a journey through time and take a look at the history of Toronto's lost amusement parks. The first notable amusement park to open within the city of Toronto was Hanlan's Point. The story of our park begins in the late 1800s, when the Hanlan family settled on the western end of Toronto Island in 1862, and became some of the first residents of the soon-to-be resort community. In 1870, as the island became a popular spot for visitors, Edward Hanlan converted his family's home into a hotel in response to the need for overnight accommodations. This hotel would then be rebuilt and expanded in 1880 to include 25 rooms. Only a few years later, Hanlan would team up with several other entrepreneurs to fund the building of a small amusement park surrounding the hotel, which would be accessed from the mainland by ferry. Hanlan's Point was a near-instant success, entertaining visitors to Toronto Island for the first 2 decades of its operation. The park would boast a variety of attractions, including a carousel, a swing ride, a scenic railway roller coaster, and a whip ride, as well as a shooting gallery and other carnival games. Plenty of shows were also available to entertain visitors, including J.W. Gorman's famous diving horses, King and Queen, who would dazzle guests by diving off a 40-foot tall platform. Another popular show was the Great and Only Museum of Living Curiosities, a freak show attraction where people could view individuals with rare talents or biological abnormalities. Hanlan's Point was also home to a dance pavilion, a tea garden, and a theater featuring live music, burlesque, and vaudeville performances. One of the most notable features of the park was the Maple Leaf Stadium, which could seat 18,000 people and was home to the Toronto Maple Leaf baseball team from 1897 to 1900, and then again from 1908 to 1909. The stadium's operation would come to an abrupt end, however, on August 10, 1909, when a fire broke out in the Little Gem vaudeville house that would decimate the park, destroying the stadium, Hanlan's famous hotel, and all of the rides and attractions save for 5 concession stands. The park would suffer over $200,000 in damages, and even worse, the fire resulted in the death of one of the park employees, a young cashier who was working at the vaudeville house when the fire broke out. But despite this tragedy, Hanlan's Point would rebuild and continue entertaining guests well into the next decade. In the end, the demise of the park would not come from fire, but rather a slow death caused by multiple problems. The Maple Leaf baseball team moving to a new stadium on the mainland in 1926 would mean the end of fans flocking to the island to watch a game and enjoy the other amusements. The increasing popularity of cars in the mid-1920s would also dissuade people from making the journey out to the island, which could still only be accessed by ferry, instead choosing to visit newer and more convenient parks like Sunnyside, which had provided fierce competition since its opening in 1922. Unable to maintain crowds amidst these problems, Hanlan's Point would eventually close its doors in the late 1920s, and finally be demolished in 1937 to make way for Toronto Island Airport. In 1907, across the bay and just over 10 kilometers east of Hanlan's Point, another iconic amusement park would open to the public. Founded by Harry and Mabel Dorsey, who purchased the land 1 year prior, Scarboro Beach Park was modeled after Luna Park on Coney Island, and boasted over 100 attractions that would entertain the residents of East Toronto for nearly 2 decades. 5 years after its debut, it was purchased by the Toronto Railway Company, who began operating it as a trolley park in order to increase passenger traffic on evenings and weekends. Much like Hanlan's Point, Scarboro Beach Park featured many amusement rides that were popular during the early 20th century, including swing rides, a carousel, fun houses, and a scenic railway roller coaster, which included a series of tunnels throughout its layout that were painted with scenes of far-off environments, like jungles and the Arctic. Another notable ride was Cascades, a Tunnel of Love or Old Mill attraction, where small wooden boats would traverse a winding course in a dark building, while riders encountered various show scenes. This type of boat ride was often popular with couples, who used them as an opportunity to get close to one another in a time where public displays of affection were frowned upon. Cascades in particular had various encounters that were designed to be frightening, so that passengers could have an excuse to hold on to each other, with one example including a glowing red devil with a pitchfork that would appear from behind a curtain. The most iconic ride at Scarboro Beach, however, was Shoot the Chutes, a water ride where passengers boarded boats and traversed a 75-foot tall incline before being spun around and slid down a chute into a pool of water below. Plenty of shows and walkthrough attractions were also available, including an acrobatics show, an exhibit where parkgoers could see premature babies in incubators, a show that recreated real natural disasters using miniature model cities and special effects, and something called the Globe of Death, where two people presumably rode bicycles within a metal sphere. Other facilities at the park included a lacrosse stadium, a bicycle track, a bandstand, a beach for swimming, and as its centerpiece, a 100-foot tall tower topped with lights and a beacon that could be seen for miles around. Scarboro Beach Amusement Park would entertain guests for 19 seasons, before it closed in 1925 after the creation of the Toronto Transport Commission ended the Toronto Railway Company's streetcar franchise with the city. No longer interested in operating the trolley park, the Toronto Railway Company sold Scarboro Beach to the city, from whom it was then purchased by the Provident Investment Company, who bulldozed the entire thing to build a housing division. Today, the neighborhood of houses is still standing, but right where the entrance to Scarboro Beach once sat is also a commemorative plaque, reminding the city's residents of the spot that once held East Toronto's beloved amusement park. The story of Sunnyside Amusement Park begins in 1911, when the Toronto Harbour Commission was tasked with revitalizing Toronto's waterfront. Part of this initiative involved increasing tourism and reclaiming land from Humber Bay by dredging sand and adding extra dirt from nearby farmland to gradually increase the city's shoreline. In a desire to attract wealthy American tourists to Toronto's waterfront and increase revenue for the Toronto Harbour Commission, it was decided that the 90 meters of reclaimed land would be used for an amusement park. And so, in June of 1922, Sunnyside Amusement Park was born. The park opened with 7 rides: Arrow Swing, a 3-row carousel, Dodgems, a bumper car attraction, a whip ride, and 3 other swing rides. The park also contained 2 dance halls, the Seabreeze and the Palais Royal, a building that originally hosted Walter Dean's boat factory, but was converted into a dance hall with the opening of the park. Additional attractions included the Sunnyside Stadium, a bandstand, facilities for boat and beach chair rentals, a bathing pavilion, and eventually in 1925, the Sunnyside Tank, a heated outdoor swimming pool that could accommodate 2,000 people, which was the largest of its kind at the time. Over the first few years of its operation, the Toronto Harbour Commission would continue to invest in Sunnyside, swapping out some of the original rides for newer and more exciting alternatives, and adding additional attractions like a mini-golf course. Some of the rides to be introduced during this era included a switchback roller coaster named the Flyer, and an old mill ride in 1923, a steeplechase roller coaster called Derby Racer in 1924, and a funhouse attraction in 1926. Sunnyside was the longest surviving of Toronto's original amusement parks. It surpassed and outlived its competition with Hanlan's Point and Scarboro Beach, but much like the parks that came before it, as the city of Toronto shifted into a new car-centric era around the mid-20th century, Sunnyside was soon to become a relic of the past. In the early days of the park's operation, the most common way to get there was through public transit, but as car ownership became more widespread in the 30s and 40s, Sunnyside's location on either side of Lakeshore Road would cause tensions between the park and the city's residents. Toronto's harbourfront just wasn't designed with parking lots to accommodate all the people that were arriving daily at the park by car. As more people began to drive, it wasn't long before the area of Lakeshore Road that cut through Sunnyside was clogged by rows of parked cars. This caused traffic around the amusement park to become brutal, which was a major concern for Torontonians since Lakeshore Road was one of the city's busiest throughways at the time. By the 1950s, newspapers were regularly printing pieces that called for the park's removal in order to improve traffic. And, eventually, after the park suffered 2 fires in November of 1955, they would get their wish. In the end, Sunnyside Amusement Park would be officially shut down in 1955 and demolished 1 year later to be replaced by every commuter's least favorite highway, the Gardiner Expressway, so that people 75 years later could still sit in soul-crushing traffic in that very spot. Of Toronto's 3 historic amusement parks, Sunnyside still has the biggest remaining footprint. Though the majority of the park and its attractions would be torn down with the closure, a small handful did survive. The Derby Racers coaster was moved to the C&E, where it would operate for several more decades. Sunnyside's carousel would eventually be purchased by Walt Disney, and after some refurbishments and adjustments, is still operating today at Disneyland. And of course, the Palais Royal continues to hold regular dances. The Sunnyside Tank is still open during the summer, and the Sunnyside Bathing Pavilion remains as gorgeous as ever. It's actually kinda crazy. I used to live in Toronto, and my family and I have driven by this thing more times than I can count, and I had no idea that it was such an important part of amusement park history. So the next time you're in Toronto, maybe see if you can spot some of the remnants of this historic age of entertainment. Pieces of the past are just waiting to be found, if you know where to look. Hey everyone, thank you for watching! If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like or a comment down below. If you want to see more content like this, you can also subscribe to my channel, and keep up to date on all the fun history videos of the future. But for now, I bid you farewell.